Alright, so, full transparency, I have sat down and tried to script this video numerous times this past week, and every time I was just getting too caught up in trying to be overly eloquent, too philosophical, it wasn't working out. So, just now, I went and scrapped all of that. This time, I'm going to take a different approach. Here are the facts. The Division 2's microtransactions and monetization strategy has evolved quite a lot in the past 18 or so months, and while it seems to be going rather successfully in terms of the developers finding new consistent streams of revenue, an increasing amount of players in the community are growing more and more frustrated with how things have been progressing. I had been brewing the idea to do this kind of a video discussing all of it for a little while now, but this week we saw the release of an all-new form of monetization, if you will, with the event pass. And so that finally pushed me over the edge. In this video, I want to have a holistic discussion about monetization in the Division 2. Talk about how we got here, why we got here, what I think works in its current form, and try and voice much of the community's concerns about areas that are in need of some improvement. Now, before we get into this, I want to make a few things clear just so that you all know how I'm approaching this subject. Firstly, while I'm sure there's some of you out there who would love for me to come on here and say microtransactions should not exist whatsoever in this game, everything should be free. In a perfect world where corporate interests weren't a thing and the underlying objective behind the majority of AAA games wasn't simply to make money, then yes, I agree. And some games get away with that. No Man's Sky is a great example of a studio that put out a game nearly 10 years ago and has supported it with major content updates ever since at zero cost and have no monetized elements whatsoever in their game. Unfortunately, an example like that is the exception to the rule and not the rule. My point is, the Division franchise is not in those circumstances. This IP and the studios that make it are owned by Ubisoft, who wants profit, and over the years there have been hundreds. At one point in time there was over 1,000 people working on the Division 2 alone. Their salaries need to be paid, server costs need to be covered, so I'm not going to turn a blind eye and say, well, Ubi should cover those ongoing yearly costs out of the goodness of their hearts. This is a business and a product that needs to generate revenue to continue receiving content and support. I acknowledge that. Additionally, for as much as some in the community want to villainize the Division 2's microtransactions, at this point in time, the game's monetization beyond DLC content remains purely cosmetic and non-gameplay affecting. If they decide to ever shift over into pay-to-win territory, then absolutely, I'll be in the streets with my pitchfork, but so long as things remain cosmetic-based, at a moral level, I'm okay with that. Now, all of that being said, as I said at the start, we all know things have changed pretty drastically in the past year and a half. And while all of what I just said is true, or I believe to be true, that doesn't mean that I think what we have right now is perfect or that they've struck the right balance between fairly monetizing the game and respecting the player's wallet, time, and commitment. And that is the crux of the issue that I want to try and tackle with this video. So, hopefully that sets the stage well enough. Let's get into this. So, before we start talking about where we're at right now in terms of microtransactions and monetization, I think it's important that we step back and analyze how exactly we got here. Let's rewind the clock to the beginning of 2023. The Division 2 has been back to live content production for a bit over 6 months, right? We had the content drought, then Season 9 dropped with Countdown, Expertise, and we were back to regular seasonal updates. At this point in time, there wasn't all that much happening in terms of regularly refreshed microtransactions. I'm sure there was scattered stuff here and there. I know they'd been doing those one-time offer premium credit bundles where you'd get an exclusive mask for buying it, but aside from the pretty limited cosmetic outfits and weapon skins that the Division 2's in-game store has had basically since the game launched, not much was going on that front. Now, at the time, believe it or not, I was among a good number of people in the community saying, hey, massive, you should put some new cosmetics in the store. Now, some people may scoff at that notion and say, why would you ever advocate for more microtransactions? Well, at the time, really the only thing to buy each season was the season pass. And I know I've heard from several players over the years who got into the habit of buying that each season simply to support the developers, even if they didn't care that much for the cosmetics. Now, believe it or not, that primary revenue source seemed to be more or less stable enough to warrant continued development. I recall an interview with Yannick, the game's creative director, where he was like, yeah, believe it or not, we make enough from those premium season passes to cover our bases and keep making content. That said, there is a big difference between getting by and raising eyebrows. As I mentioned earlier, in a perfect world, perhaps there would be no need for microtransactions at all in live games like these, but in reality, and specifically in the Division's case, Ubisoft has a lot of live and ongoing IPs and games. And while even games like For Honor, which I play every now and then, continue to be supported to this day, which is kind of a miracle, if you break it down, they really don't get that much content on a yearly basis. Their development team is funded enough to get by, release a new hero every now and then, do some balancing, quality of life, all of that, but they're really not getting major content drops all that often because they simply don't have the resources or the budget to do it. Now, although The Division 2 is an entirely different genre of game, the same principles apply. Doing content like new legendary missions, as we got back in Season 10, that requires a certain level of resources and budget allocation, but it takes less of those things than to do a whole new game mode, like Countdown or Descent, and those take considerably less to produce than an entire DLC, like with Battle for Brooklyn. So, circling back, the rationale back then was, great, we're surviving with Season Pass revenue, but there's a lot of players out there who would happily pick up some cool cosmetics, especially if it means that the game can start bumping up its revenue, perhaps get corporate to see a little bit more value in the project, allocate some more developers or budget, hopes and dreams, right? So that was early 2023. The months go by, we hear about what they're doing for Year 5, awesome. We get Descent in the summer, then Paradise Lost in the fall, and that season was when we were hunting down the Recruiter. Now, as soon as they revealed the new Recruiter look, many in the community were like, oh, I want that. And, you know, maybe some people would take it back now, but plenty of people were saying, massive, take my money, give me that skin. And so they said, okay. Once that finale mission dropped and we took down the Recruiter, his skin and that outfit appeared in the cash shop for a whopping 2,625 premium credits. Basically equivalent, if you're going to do the 100 credits per unit of currency conversion, to about $26 USD. A lot of money for one cosmetic outfit, but people asked for it and they got it. Now, you'd think at such a steep price point that might off-put some people who might have even been enthusiastic to pick it up, whether it be for financial or just moral reasons. That's a lot of money. Well, my friends, this really was the turning point for everything. I can't give you any specifics or get too in depth, but I've heard some things, been given some rough ideas. That Recruiter skin, which first dropped right at the end of 2023, sold like hotcakes. I mean, they made bank on that thing. And so, you know, imagine you're in Mass's position. You're like, oh shit, we really haven't been doing all that many store exclusives. We're just getting by with season passes. But if this is how much we're leaving on the table by doing so, and so this is when we really saw things begin to change. It wasn't immediate, but if you'll recall, a few months later, we got the 5 Rogue Agent outfits from Warlords of New York. We got Kelso's bundle at the end of Year 5 Season 3, and slowly but surely the pace increased to where nowadays there is essentially a new premium store bundle every single week in the game. And that progression over the past 18 months has rubbed some people the wrong way. Now, that's not the only thing that's happened, right? At the same time, there is the whole deal with apparel events, where once a season, we used to have these events that would usually introduce 4 to 6 new outfits, and while you had the option of buying keys for those random crates with premium credits, normally it was reasonable enough to grind out everything you needed via gameplay in the 3-ish weeks that those events would normally last. Those events, however, got outright removed from the game when we transitioned to Seasons 2.0 last October. Now, at the time, the devs gave a few reasons as for why they did this. They said, for one, that they didn't think the gameplay element of them was very enticing, just having people grind Shade XP to get the keys, which, like, sure, I guess. Although this week we just got the new event pass feature, which is kind of like an apparel event, and to go through that, you're just grinding season XP. So, but yeah, then on the other hand, which I do think is a more valid argument, they said that because of how we're doing things now with seasonal events like the winter, summer, mooncake ones, all of that, you're getting roughly the same number of cosmetics per season just from different sources than the previously consolidated apparel events. Now, I've seen some people try to push back on this claim. It's mostly true, though. If you look at this current season, for example, we got one free outfit from the season pass, where, keep in mind, the only outfits on the season passes before Seasons 2.0 2.0 was on the premium side. Now we get one on the free track. We got one from the summer event via the project chain. And as of this week, we got 2 more from the free rewards on the event pass. And then if you want to take it one step further, there was also that promotional outfit for Xbox Game Pass, the EMT gear, I think it was called. There's been a few of those promotional things recently. So that's 4 or 5 right there. There's still several more weeks of the season to go. We'll see if we get more. So quantity-wise, I do think they have a point there. There are more sources of free cosmetics now that do roughly equate to the singular gameplay-based apparel event that we used to get. That comes with 2 caveats, however, that the community has rightly pointed out. For one, for the most part, apparel event items were usually pretty cool. Even if you didn't personally jive with every single theme that they did, the items were of high quality and distinct individually, whereas now, with those free outfits I mentioned, the season pass does award a free outfit, but the ones that are on the premium track tend to be a good bit cooler. Seasonal events like the summer event that we just had do award a free outfit, but almost every time the exact same outfit is present in the store for premium credits, yet it's recolored and shaded to usually look quite a bit cooler. Then there's the whole matter of uniforms versus individual pieces, which I know people have big gripes with. That topic specifically I'm actually not going to get as deeply into, as I know that also transcends into a technical implementation conversation. By that I mean, the art team has previously explained how they can actually squeeze more detail into uniform cosmetics by having a singular thing that you equip. They can then fine-tune the technical budget of that item, whereas with individual pieces, they have to ensure that by mixing that with certain other pieces, you're not going to overload hardware processing power, which is normally a concern when it comes to stuff like last-gen consoles crashing in multiplayer content. So that's a bit of a trickier topic. But I do absolutely agree that whereas we used to get a pretty healthy balance of individual piece sets and uniforms, nowadays things are heavily skewed towards uniforms, both in free and premium rewards. But we covered an increased amount of store bundles, the loss of apparel events, and then, as I mentioned earlier, this week we saw them implement the game's first ever event pass, which is basically a mini battle pass specifically tailored to the theme of that event. This time around, that being the Payday franchise collab. The main complaint here being, if you want all of the rewards, then you need to buy the premium pass for that event specifically. It's not given to you if you already own the premium pass for that overall season, and so many players feel off about having to buy multiple passes within one season. Now, I do have feedback on this, which we'll get to. To play devil's advocate though, at least compared to the prior collaboration we got with the Stalker franchise, if you'll recall there, those items were store exclusive entirely, and I think it cost around 20 to 30 USD to pick them all up. I can respect that this time around, half of the outfits are free within that event pass, and then if you do want to pick the rest up, it's only $10, which is considerably cheaper. Again, I don't think that means it's perfect as is, but if you're going to criticize it, I think you also need to point out the pros. And having some items be free while also reducing the costs on the paid ones, it's a step in the right direction, in my opinion. So, overall, that is where we're at. I know that was a comprehensive recap and history, but the community is at a bit of a crossroads right now when it comes to monetization. Because whereas not all that long ago, we were at a point where many were openly saying, hey, you should consider adding more stuff to the store so that we can support you. Today, it feels like it is hard to escape the in-game monetization. With new bundles every week, in-game and social media posts about them, frequent monetized events rolling through, everything. And while I do remain firm on my stance that none of this is gameplay affecting, therefore I'm not opposed to it being present in the game, things have gotten to a point where even someone as big as a fan like myself is like, alright, perhaps there needs to be a conversation about reeling these things in a little bit. Because at the end of the day, while I'm sure there are players out there who buy every single bundle every week that it drops, by pushing the needle too far with this stuff, you do risk spilling into the territory where you start to burn those fans who at one point did willingly want to monetarily support you just for the sake of goodwill towards the team and the game. If you shove these things in players' faces too hard and over-monetize too far, that goodwill will slowly drain away. And at a certain point, I would imagine that you do eventually see revenue start to decline as enough people say, alright, I don't want to support this anymore. And at that point, that is when it becomes tough to win people back. And so, for the remainder of this video, now that I've spent the last 10 minutes setting things up, I want to put forward some of my proposals on how to find that balance again. As I plainly said in the intro, I'm not opposed to monetization in games like these. I want to see the Division franchise continue to rebound, to prosper, moving forward, to get more resources, more funding, and I want the team to be able to take advantage of that revenue stream that the recruiter outfit showed showed them existed. At the same time though, as a player, I don't want to lose that spark of feeling cosmetic accomplishment when it comes to in-game challenges and progression, and as a creator, if I'm not overstepping, somewhat an advocate for the community, I don't want to see increasing amounts of people say that they're no longer being respected for their investment into the game, because that is the conclusion that more and more people are reaching. So, with all of that said, I think there are three main categories of feedback and points of which I think we could see real change with the Division 2's current model of monetization. Those categories are pricing, implementation, and communication. So, let's go down the list one by one, starting with pricing. Now, this is the area in which I'm the least knowledgeable and probably have the least feedback to give. Frankly, I bring up the point because players say that seeing $18, $20, $25 or more bundles regularly in the game is off-putting to them, and that by setting those price points so high, they are actively uninclined to want to willingly support the game by buying them. Now, the problems in terms of me giving feedback on this is that I don't know what the data is. None of us do. There are people on the Division's dev team and dev teams worldwide whose job it is to analyze spending habits and fine-tune price points to where the maximum amount of people will buy these kinds of cosmetics. And so, even though on Reddit and wherever else you might see an entire thread's worth of people saying this is too high, I'm not getting it, it's a very legitimate possibility that there are way more people out there who just don't care and are buying them anyway. And if the spending crowd outweighs the non-spending crowd, and by lowering the price point they would actually end up losing out on total revenue while still putting in the same amount of work to create the outfits, well, again, that's one of those moments where you're like, it's kind of hard to argue with them for doing it that way. But, as we mentioned a moment ago, this does circle back to the concept of player respect. You want to monetize a certain amount of cosmetics? Sure. But keeping those costs at a level that at least your average, dedicated and veteran player, let's say, can comfortably afford, that is something that is within your control. And doing so may very well earn back many of those people's goodwill who think that the current prices are far too high. And again, there was a time when people were asking for there to be more ways for them to spend money, simply to support the game. I'd wager that contemplating at least a moderate reduction in prices across the board could reinvigorate some of that spirit, and at the very least, working on finding a better and more transparent pricing model could be something that many players would appreciate. By that I mean, you see a bundle 1 week that costs, let's say, 2,340 credits once that discount that's always there is applied, whereas next week, one's in there for 1,780. And although of course they're different, they come with the same total number of items across uniforms, backpack skins, weapon skins, whatever. Now, like I mentioned before, these prices are not arbitrary. There are people who are wizards at looking at the data, comparing how much it costs to get X number of credits, and all of this stuff is worked out to a science for what costs what, how many credits that'll leave the average spender with afterwards, what they might choose to go and get next time. So I'm not saying all of that work gets thrown out of the window. At the end of the day, I have no clue what goes into all of that, but all I'm saying is that if we could reach some kind of a middle ground as far as shaving off some of those super high costs that we see at times, and making costs a little bit more uniform, no pun intended, and predictable for these loyal agents who want to try and plan ahead, set aside some money to support their favorite game, I think that could go a long way in earning back some of that player respect that I mentioned. Creating a system that says, hey, yes, this is monetized so that we can generate revenue as a project, but it's also structured in such a way that makes it as fair as possible if you choose to go out of your way and support us. That's all. So, that was pricing. Let's move on to the next category of feedback, implementation. Now, this one is going to be a bit more scattered. It's also where I have the most amount of things to say, I think, but I'll try and keep things concise. At a high level, though, my underlying point with this section is that there are various different ways in which the Division 2 is currently monetized that are either overly convoluted or simply seem designed to lock you out from certain rewards unless you pay top dollar. And I think that with just some small tweaks and changes, you can shift the narrative away from we're trying to extract the maximum amount of money from the player base, which is how many people view the current monetization implementation to be, to we have various monetized elements in the game to help support the game's growth, but it is done so in the most fair and ethical way we can in order to respect our players' time and money. So, going down the list, let's start with bundles, as we were just discussing that in the prior section. I had this idea come to me recently, and I went, this would probably be quite popular. Now, to be fair, I don't know how much work this would be to implement, so I don't want to overstep in saying this would be easy, but as we discussed earlier, a growing complaint and community sentiment is that all of the paid cosmetics are simply cooler than the free ones. And, among other benefits, this would be one big way to mend that. The idea is, how about implementing a new monthly project? That's right, not a weekly project, a monthly one. I don't know what the objectives would be per se, that's for a separate discussion, but the idea is that it would take a decent amount of playing, given it is around for an entire month. However, for completing it, among other rewards potentially, you earn a bundle fragment. That name can be up for discussion. And by earning 3 total fragments, meaning you do 3 of these monthly projects, aka you could do this cycle once per season, you form a bundle key. What does that bundle key then do? It lets you acquire a store bundle for free. Now, yes, I'm sure that would cause them to take a hit in revenue, but come on, what do we get? 8, 10, 12, even maybe more new bundles per season? I think if you allowed players the opportunity, again, this isn't for free, they would still have to go and earn it, but the opportunity to get 1 store bundle per season just by playing the game, that would go a long way towards showing that you respect the player's time and their commitment to the game. Once again, we monetize this to keep new content flowing, but here's the system that'll let you pick up 1 cool outfit per season as a thank you. And like I said, if players think that paid cosmetics are the coolest looking, well, they now have the chance to pick up whichever one they think is coolest and redeem it for free once per season. So again, practically, I don't know how much work that would take to implement. I don't know how that would impact revenue, but I feel as though it would be a big winner within the community. I then wanted to shift over to discussing a few points surrounding the new event pass feature. As the devs stated recently, this is a new system that they intend to use regularly as time goes on, so it's here to stay, and for those who currently don't like it, that might not be good news to hear. How can we try and make it better? Well, here is my first big gripe about how they've gone about implementing this. In theory, when you first look at the event pass, the idea is, okay, you've got your free and premium rewards, you rank up via gameplay, and everything is laid out here in 2 neat tracks so that the consumer, us, has easy visibility as to which rewards are given from what, and we can then make an informed decision, right? Well, not quite, because at least with how they've gone about structuring the Payday collab here, there are 2 other sources of paid rewards, scattering what should otherwise be a neatly consolidated reward track. Now, the first deviation is actually the one that irked me the most, because for a 20-tier event pass, there is a premium access bundle that offers you an exclusive mask and reward. This Sydney mask you cannot get any other way from the event, including if you just buy the regular premium access. You have to get the bundle if you want it. And what is that bundle? Well, it's double the price of regular premium, and you get the premium track access, the Sydney mask, and 20 tier skips for a 20-tier pass. So it's essentially the same kind of premium bundle that they offer for the regular season pass, except here you just auto-complete the event because there's only 20 tiers. And so I feel like this is a prime example of what I mentioned earlier, where this just feels designed to be overly convoluted and to confuse the consumer out of more money rather than just plainly lay things out for them. You know? And the main reason why this frustrates me so much is that the event pass structure itself is a way to place some emphasis back on gameplay for earning at least the free rewards here, much like apparel events did back in the day. Except, if you want to earn all of the possible rewards for this event, even if you plan on buying premium access to support the game and the devs, then you're forced to forego the gameplay element because this bundle just auto-completes the entire thing. And so, my feedback here, I don't think this kind of a bundle belongs with a mini 2-week event pass. If you want to keep that option in place for the overall 100 tier season pass, sure, that's another deal, but this is simply over monetizing things, in my honest opinion. The other form of scattering out rewards that I mentioned is how that alongside the Payday event pass, simultaneously there was a new bundle launched in the shop with 2 more Payday masks, and again, this is the only way that you can get them. So what went from on paper a fairly reasonably priced, consolidated, limited time gameplay event for new cosmetic rewards, in actuality, if you want to collect everything, then you need to spend $30 USD in order to get the store bundle and the premium access bundle for the premium track on the pass itself and the exclusive mask that's there. one final time, it's just overly convoluted, and from the sentiments that I've seen in the community, this is the kind of stuff that actively dissuades players who might have otherwise picked up a fairly priced event pass just to support or for some mid-season gameplay incentives. It dissuades them from doing so because it feels like the game is going out of its way to hide the true cost of what's really being asked and splitting these rewards to too many different paid sources. So, again, my personal feedback and advice for these event passes: don't do a premium bundle with tier skips, don't do a simultaneous store bundle offshooting other rewards there. Just keep everything nice and neatly consolidated to one reward pass. You can even bump it up to 30 levels if that means reformatting to fit the other stuff in there, but I think that would be much more straightforward and much more appreciated. My final note on this, and I mentioned it in my payday event guide last week, if you really want to sell players on the value of these event passes and convince them that this form of monetization isn't here to squeeze money, but rather to offer fair options that does benefit the game indeed, but also respects the player's wallet, make it so that if a player already owns the premium pass for that overall season, right, the main season pass, then have it be so that they get a discounted rate for the event pass premium track, so that instead of $10 USD, if you already own premium on the season pass, it's now only $5 for the event pass premium. In my mind, this would do two really smart things. For one, again, it lowers the barrier and makes the event pass proposition itself a bit more fair, and I would guess popular among the community. $5 for 30 tiers of rewards would be a really slick deal. But in the process, it then also adds an additional incentive to purchasing the greater season pass. So you plan to run 2 event passes per season moving forward. Well, if I know that buying the premium season pass is going to mean that I can then pick up both of those 2 premium event passes for $5 a pop, that's a pretty damn good incentive. And I wouldn't be shocked if in the end the total revenue balances out or even potentially increases once people realize the newfound value that it brings. And once again, not trying to repeat myself a million times over, it's an ethical, player-first approach to fairly monetizing these systems, which, in my mind, should be a top priority when implementing these things. Alright, well that is everything that I have under the implementation category of feedback. The final section here that I wanted to hit on, I'll keep it brief as I have gone on about this in a few recent videos, and that's communication. My point here is pretty simple. If you want to use social media channels or the game's built-in notification banner when you log in to promote new store bundles or other microtransaction-based news, that's completely fine. However, what we've seen happen over that 18 or so month window, as these things have become more and more common, is that oftentimes marketing new monetization opportunities at times seems to be taking precedent over using those very same channels to inform the player base about critical bugs or other known issues. So really, all I'm proposing is rethink the communication strategy here. Again, if everything in the game is going all right at the moment and you just dropped a sick new hunter themed bundle in the store, or you just launched a new event pass, by all means, drop a trailer, advertise it, generate the game some money. But at a time like right now, when I'm making this video, where we have a bug that's causing players to lose visual access to every item within their stash, and the fix for that issue has been pushed back to an undetermined date due to complications behind the scenes, then, in my view, at a time like that, you need to be blasting clear and concise communication about that above all else. Use social media channels to regularly update people about when the known issues board is being updated. God knows, not enough people regularly check there. Use the in-game notification banner to say, alert, the stash has a visual bug where it appears as though you've lost all of your items. Don't worry, they're not gone. Here is the workaround until we can implement a fix. Because as I said in some prior videos, there are casual players out there who don't follow content creators like me or search up the Division 2 at all online. And what kind of message does it send out if they're logging in to see messages about, hey, check out the new Death Roll bundle in the store right now, but they then walk up to their stash, everything is gone, and they have no idea what happened? It's really just about optics more than anything else. Because, in my mind, keeping a player around who might one day decide to support their favorite game by buying a bundle or two is much more valuable than risking losing one by not informing them about critical issues, but instead pushing a microtransaction ad in front of them, hoping they'll buy one now. Well, I think that's about all I've got for this video. I've said my piece. I don't consider these kinds of videos to be fun to make like the rest of my content, but in a time like this where something such as microtransactions and monetization are becoming as divisive in this game as they are, then I feel like something has to be said. you know? So, if you made it all the way through, whichever side of this discussion you may be on, thank you. I would love to read through any and all thoughts you guys have on the subject of monetization down in the comments below, whether you agree with my takes, disagree. As always, my only request is that we keep things civil, as that is the best and only way to hopefully actually see progress made here. But that's all I've got. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, RogueGold out.